Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar from Spec Innovation, Manage Mission Critical Requirements through Agile and Innoslate. My name is Taylor Duffy, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. First, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions and we'll get them answered in the Q&A part of the webinar. You can also interact with us on LinkedIn through the Innoslate users group or through Twitter using the handle @SpecInnovations. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you after the live presentation, so keep an eye out for it in your inbox. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Stephen Dam. In today's webinar, Dr. Dam will show how Innoslate leverages an agile methodology through both the software development side and the systems engineering side, and how you can be using Agile for your system. Dr. Dam is the president and founder of Spec Innovations, as well as one of our DODAF training instructors. He has been involved with research, experiments, operations analysis, software development, systems engineering, and training for more than 40 years. He has also received an Expert Systems Engineering Professional ESCP certification from INCOSE. He is currently applying systems engineering techniques to various DoD, DOE, and commercial projects. Feel free to send Dr. Dam any questions through the LinkedIn users group or send him an email to steven.dam@specinnovations.com. And now I'll hand over the controls to Dr. Dam and we'll get started.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it. So let's go through today's agenda. So basically, we're going to talk a little bit about the Agile Manifesto. Since we're talking about Agile, let's level set everybody if you're not familiar with the manifesto. And then talk about Agile systems engineering and some of the differences there. So how we apply that. So Agile systems engineering gets you more into the whole requirement side of the equation, really. In fact, we want to talk about the difference between requirements and issues and how that's handled. Middle out approach, a little bit of that, to talk about how we've actually applied an Agile-like approach for many, many decades. It just wasn't called that. We call it middle out. And then talk a little bit about what we're doing with Innoslate development, so you can see how we've applied it actually over the years, and then talk about specific tools that Innoslate provides for Agile software and systems engineering development. Okay, so Agile Manifesto. So those who aren't familiar, it's an easy Google search, right? Just look for Agile Software Development Manifesto, and boom, this pops up. And it's a very interesting manifesto, and reading about it, you kind of go, wow, this is kind of interesting. This really was that driving statement, the force behind the whole Agile software development process. Let's get away from the processes and tool focus and go back to the individuals and interactions. We do that right now in our software development by having an open area, people with standing desks, and they talk all the time. It's like communications that you see, an interaction between the people. Definitely working software has been a big push. Get that done first, then worry about the documentation. And so, of course, you know, as the software guys love to say, their code is all self-documenting. And then, of course, customer collaboration is always a thing for us, because, in fact, that's one of the things we have on our feedback form on our website, on our actually dashboard of Innoslate, is to try to get that collaboration with the customers to help get that feedback and understanding of what you're looking for, what do you need, and what are your problems that need to be solved. And of course, responding to change, we really do our best to be flexible in terms of what we can do, when we can get things in. We have plans for each release, but you know, sometimes there's urgent things people need, and we try to get them in there. So again, we think we have been living that for the last 10 years that we've been doing Innoslate. But the funny part is that most of the Agile industry focuses on process, really. It's sprints and epics and scrums and tools, Jira, GitHub, GitLab, all these kinds of tools. There's big focus on those things as well. So that it's kind of that opposite of what the manifesto says, seems to be the big push, particularly, of course, from tool vendors. They're going to always be pushing the tool and the processes and things like that. But again, all these approaches are great, and including scaled agile framework, they're dependent upon functional requirements. Okay, so software developers, if you go look at the first step in any of these processes and things like that, and what they're expecting was someone to hand them a set of functional requirements. And that's what they need to get started, really, to write good software. So where do functional requirements come from? Yeah, well, how about from systems engineering? And particularly agile systems engineering is something that's been around for quite some time. One of the leading proponents is Rick Dove, and he's been very active in this, and there's a very active group at the International Council on Systems Engineering in COSI that has a working group in this area for, I think, easily a decade and a half, if not longer. I think it predated the whole agile software development to a certain extent, perhaps even. And so what they're looking to do is how can create a life cycle process. And again, if you look at the different steps in the life cycle process, well, that's the same steps we've historically done in any other way, V's and things like that. Ultimately, you've got to go through the process of understanding what you're going to do, building it, producing it, utilizing it, supporting it, and retiring it. And in that cycle always falls. And the interesting thing, of course, is they say these are happening concurrently. So any one of these stages or tasks can happen concurrently. So keep that in mind when you see a middle out process, because that's really kind of a key part of what we do too. And of course, it's iterative and incremental. All those great words fit with what they're trying to do. And again, the software side of it is trying to do pretty much the same kinds of things. And so the difficulty we get into is that there are formal milestone reviews that people have found historically are good for the overall life cycle development. So how do you mix those? So the picture on the right is an attempt to show you how you would do that and line up your different what we call SETR events, systems engineering technical review events, along with the agile cycle of releases. So the idea here is you build your requirements deck quickly, and then get that going to the software program to start coding. And then as the software coders are doing their next step, you want to be building more requirements. So again, that top part becomes iterative too. And so if you're really thinking this through, and certainly that's the way we've implemented it. So again, Agile Systems Engineering was meant to support Agile software development by providing them the functional requirements that they need. And the key is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable capabilities. That's a key concept, again, of Agile Systems Engineering. We're trying to get you product quickly, something you can work with, and it won't be 100% of what you need. Again, we used to call this incremental development. We had terms called pre-planned product improvement. Those are all things that are still concepts that are correct and they're very agile-like in their approach. And again, so this is not, in a sense, this is not new. It's just kind of a new focus, and people are trying to apply new techniques and tools to it, particularly. So again, plan for evolving requirements, and that's tough. The planning for it is you can basically have a point in time where you're always looking at the requirements deck and see how that's growing and changing and evolving. But creating a plan for that sometimes is difficult because you can't really predict what requirements are needed in the future. Where you can do that, that's of course great. Delivering working capabilities frequently, yes, absolutely. Again, that's where particularly software allows us, particularly software as a service, allows us to provide things out quickly into the community so they can quickly see changes and have it see just new capabilities come into play. We just released 4.7 in January, end of January, beginning of February. I think we finally just got the enterprise release of that out. We had to delay a little bit because we found some problems. So we delayed for that. So again, this is part of that being flexible and adjusting to what the actual working software is versus a hard and fast schedule. Again, you can see a lot more about this if you go to the Systems Engineering Body of Knowledge Wiki, and this is the link for that if you want to see a lot more about this. There's a raft of great information about this that Rick and his colleagues have done for years and years. Okay, so now we want, okay, the software guys call requirements issues. And so when you realize that systems engineering, again, is driving requirements from the customer needs, environmental constraints, things like that. Often that's where we're starting, particularly if you're starting early in the process. At the architecture level, I find myself often working with those things like laws and regulations and policies, techniques and procedures. Those kinds of things will be places I can start in getting that customer need. How does the customer want to work? And of course, functional analysis and modeling and simulation is another source of those functional requirements. You can model the processes. Again, they call them use cases today. We call them scenarios or threads. They're all basically the same idea as you're trying to understand functionally, what is it you're going to do? How is the system going to be operated? Again, this is another place where the human-computer interaction can be easily identified quickly and early in the process. So we want to do that. Again, the software tools use issues as a home for the requirements. And so software developers, remember, are often really focused on bugs versus feature enhancements. So that's the way they kind of look at the world, right? They've got a problem with it, or something isn't working right or isn't working well. They don't go off and write a requirement for it. They realize there's a problem, they identify as a bug, and then that becomes an issue, and they track through issue tracking. Well, you know, if you've given a set of functional requirements, there is probably traceability of those bugs back to those functional requirements as well. So you might want that traceability and be able to see, well, what is the impact and what caused this bug maybe, and so maybe you can improve your process in the future. So again, that's something you do retroactively, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do it right away. So let me talk to you a little bit about our middle out process. So if you notice this process, and if you look at the V diagram at the top, again, the V operation timeline can be very short. I have executed the entire V in the matter of weeks before, okay, depending on what you're building and what you're doing and what the scope of the problem is. And it's very iterative. I reuse the same process, and the timeline view I'm showing you here below is basically the timeline that goes with each of those, the ones coming down the V. We have another process for going back up the V. But this is the requirements generation process, particularly when you think about it. So we analyze requirements where appropriate if we've got them, and again, that may very well be just laws and policies, other constraints that are problems. We take that information and then I spend a lot of time doing functional analysis, because that's where I can derive the functional behavior I want from the system. Very often we'll take and model what's the current procedure somebody's following, and use that to help us understand and create a better procedure, a better process, and something that can be automated with software or with hardware, or again, maybe it's just a procedure. Maybe I need a standard operating procedure and I don't have to spend money on things. The Department of Defense has something called .mil-PF. There's a whole set of these things, doctrine, organization, training, that are things that have to be looked at first before you ever decide to go off and spend money on a material solution. So you have to justify that you can't really solve the problem without one of these other ways. And so that's something to always keep in mind. And I think, you know, for systems engineers, that's one of the things we think about very early in the architecture development phase of the project. And notice again, with architecture development, you could come up with a set of high-level requirements that then can be spun off and to create multiple system designs. So this is another thing that's always people are confused when they look at the V diagram. They don't think of it as, they see it as a linear process. It's really not. It was never intended to be that. It was meant to be done incrementally. So this timeline diagram, you see at any point in time, I'm doing multiple tasks, and that might change what I do. And particularly one of the most important things I need to do is make sure I put output to my customers to see the progress. And that's why that bottom line is probably one of the most important lines on it, is the generating the operational system views, graphics, briefings, and reports. I want to be able to do that. Again, my job as a systems engineer is to do the documentation, is to make it correct. So if you look at this process, it's iterative, it's event-driven, it has parallel tasks, and the product's provided as needed, and then it can support model-based reviews, which is, again, considered a best practice. So we've implemented this and used this for decades. Again, this predates our even development of Innoslate, using this particular model. So, and approach. And this is in my books. If you want to go read more about this, it's in my DODAF books, and it's also in my Real MBSE book. And so you can see how we've implemented it and how it really is an agile kind of process. So let's take an example of using this kind of process in Innoslate. So in Innoslate, we have an overall roadmap, and you're seeing it here, where we are doing an alternating between what we call feature releases and bug releases. I'm not sure we should call those bug releases, because most of these things are considered more minor enhancements. Often, if we have an actual bug where there's actual error in the software, it's causing some kind of real problem, that we usually address very rapidly, and we'll address it in between cycles. So that happens kind of in parallel to these major development cycles. I'll give you an example right now. We just released 4.7. We're just started the 4.8 code development. We're of course building. We didn't need requirements for that, because what we have is a list of issues to work off still as part of what we're going to do in 4.8. But one of the things we're in particular doing is updating several pieces of libraries and things that we're using to a newer version. And so we do that for a variety of reasons, and new features, new capabilities, security enhancements, things like that. So again, that's part of that cycle that we're doing with 4.8. But in parallel, we're developing the 4.9 requirements. We're going through and looking at what people have asked for, what can we add to that, and how can we make this work better. So the requirements for that next version are developed prior to the software development. So when software development's ready to start their next round, they have the new set of requirements that they need. And so that uses the time needed for the proper research and requirements development. So we found this works very well. It took us a number of years to get really into the cycle, and we got out of it a little bit here and there, especially 4.3 to 4.5 ended up being pretty much done from some research. We had a research project with the Missile Defense Agency and some of our Navy work. And so we were able to bring together much of that prototyping we did there and create requirements and code and recode it to create these later versions. So, but we're trying to get back into a regular cycle of the feature release, bug release. Okay, so Innoslate tools for Agile software and system, and it's a lot of what you wanted to hear about and know about today. So I'm going to go through some slides, and then I'll go in and show you some of the particular features and particularly some of the new stuff that's come out with it. So one of the things is requirements development itself. Okay, so we do have a documents view. A type of document is requirements. It's a special type of document. It brings in our quality checker, quality score. You can use labels for filtering. There's a rationale field, things like that. All these are part of what makes a requirement. And so the quality score is checked using natural language processing algorithms. I think we have 6 out of the 8 that are listed are checked automatically. And then so that's one part of the whole message and capability with it. We also have the check for the traceability there. If you see the S, T, and V in there, those are satisfied by trace to, verified by relationships have been established. So that's one of the ways you can quickly see if I've got a gap or a problem in terms of traceability. So that's on at the document level. Another view we have just added is compilation view, and particularly if you're doing all your requirements and some other classes of information rather than requirements themselves. Like, for example, let's say you're doing the functional analysis and you have everything in your actions. Well, everybody said, well, gee, can't we put the actions directly in? I've got all my information in there. I've written it like a requirement, or I've written it like something I want to get across. Can we create this other view? So we did that recently. I will tell you that what it does is each class can then be tied to an artifact, okay, which is the linkage we have between the information, and of course an artifact is where you can store final products and things as well. But it will let you then take and put any class tied to that artifact now. But if you want to see a decomposition of that class, it only does decomposition of the class itself. So again, that's something, it's not probably exactly what everybody wants, but it was something we could do quickly and easily and get something out there that people could use. The American Society for Mechanical Engineers is actually developing a facility standard using Innoslate, and they asked for this specifically. Quality checker I mentioned already, and how we do that, and that's kind of due for an update. We're in the process of looking for that. The quality checker is actually many factors. It's not just this. There's also a whole intelligence view that has requirements factors in it as well for checking and traceability and all kinds of things with it. So that's another part of the requirements deck in terms of that traceability. And I know somebody's going to ask the question, well, Incosi just came out with these 15 requirements. We haven't really sat down and looked at those hard. We're going to do that in an update. But basically, we believe we've got all of them covered already between what's in this view, the requirements view, and the intelligence view. So, traceability assist matrix. Now, this is another thing that's kind of unique to us. Again, it's another NLP checker. So what it does is lets you see, in this case, I'm looking at my verification requirements in the rows, and my columns are my test cases. So this lets me see as I hover over them, and I'm hovering at the moment, I'm hovering over the intersection between appropriate markings and propellant tank inspection. Okay, so if I hover over that, it's light green. That's because it has information in it that looks like it fits. That should be a good place to make that connection. So again, it's looking at the name, number, and description and seeing if they fit there to get together. What else? Oh, and risk analysis. So of course, another thing you might want to be doing as part of this work in requirements development is looking at your risks. And of course, we do have a complete risk capability with the tool, with both a risk matrix and risk burn down charts. It is probabilistic in nature, probability and consequence for the risk analysis. There are other ways to put other types of risk formatting in there, but ultimately, the nice thing is that also can trace to your mitigation activities, your cost, all the other things. So again, it gives you a very nice compatible way to do your risk analysis as part of your requirements development and requirements analysis. Okay, the next thing is tracking software development. So this is something we added in a couple versions ago. We have the ability to interface directly with GitHub. So GitHub is one of those repositories, software repositories that people use. It's actually one of the most popular ones of the group. We have looked at Jira. We've looked at GitLab. They all have the same basic structures. They all are based on the Git protocol. And so that technology, so they should be easy to interface with, but we've run into problems with various ones. But once you select a repository, you start getting these other views. So there's the overview you're seeing at the top. There's a Kanban board. It's tracking, again, the issue tracking. We have issues themselves, and you can get to see individual issues. You can push issues back down to the software folks for them to resolve. You can track the pull requests. This is the, where they're pulling the information and working with the software. Commitments as well, then that's when they committed the software back, and of course the commitment activity. But the most important, interesting new thing that just came out with 4.7 is we have a round trip. So you can now change the issue status in GitHub, and it'll automatically update that issue status in Innoslate. So again, our purpose as systems engineers in the software development part of the process is to monitor the software development, make sure the requirements are good for them and work for them, okay? As they do detailed development, they will always find problems with the requirements. Do not think that you just can throw those requirements over the transom and you're going to get back working code that is exactly what you asked for, because that's probably not going to happen. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. Exactly. And again, it's that dialogue between systems engineering and the software development team that you want to have happen so you can keep things moving in the path that you want them to do. So in other words, if they go, they may say, hey, I can go do this, and that may be a good thing or maybe a bad thing, and then you can help them understand whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Again, so again, working together as a team helps you do that. Of course, we have many other program management tools in Innoslate itself. There's an actual project management dashboard that has a calendar, it has upcoming date tracking, it has links to different boards and Gantt charts, Kanban boards, Gantt charts, things like that. We also have a new we even have a widget on our dashboard I didn't mention, where you can put in a countdown clock. So if you have something important coming up, some key milestone, something you want to track daily, you can put that on your dashboard. One of my favorite things, actually. Again, Kanban boards are available here as well. So again, this is now in Innoslate, not viewing the Kanban board information that's in GitHub, but having your own. So if you want to create your own set of those, you can. We have good examples of this, by the way, in the Lunar Rover example that's on the, as you do the startup, you're getting started and you get the sample problems. That Lunar Rover has a number of these different things in it. You have to go to 2050 though. So we wanted you to realize that we wanted you to see it, all the different things coming up and things like that. So just make the calendar go to 2050 and you'll see where things are going on. Gantt charts I mentioned, we also have that capability that has the dependencies between the different ones, so you can do the first, finish to start, start to finish, those kinds of things. Process modeling, of course, these all tie together and link together. So all these are what we call tasks, and the tasks are a subclass of actions, which means all that action diagramming and things like that work with this, and so do the simulators. So you can you can resource load them, you can allocate them to people, you can put cost associated with it. So you can create very, very detailed models if you want of your entire process and activities. Okay, so I wanted to give a little time for questions and answers. So let's see if we have that first, and then otherwise I'll go through the the tool itself.
Thanks, Dr. Dan. We've received several questions already. If you haven't done so, please send your questions through the panel on the right. Dr. Dan will answer as many questions as he can before our time is up. So the first question is, are there any plans for Innoslate to have more Agile features in the future?
So I have not seen much else we need to add at this point. If there are other features people would like, they certainly can request them, and we'll see what we can add. Usually we can do that. Again, we're trying to separate out the Agile software development from the Agile systems engineering. And so we really think you want, as a software developer, you want to use those software development tools. As a system engineer, I need to be able to use a systems engineering tool because I've got to communicate with everybody, not just the software developers. And this is one of the things I've seen actually as being a big problem is people are trying to use the software engineering tools to do the systems engineering. It doesn't work well that way, and I've watched that happen for many, many decades. I tried it myself back in the 80s. I had a data flow diagramming tool, Jordan DeMarco data flow diagramming tool. I know I'm dating myself. And I had I think it was a state machine diagram capability in a tool. And I found that just never sat well with anybody I was trying to show for systems engineering. They just didn't quite get it. The symbology threw them off, and just the naming conventions that people were using. It just didn't work for people. And I'm talking about my customers. I'm talking about my other engineering disciplines. Software people got it. They were happy, but not anybody else. So.
Next question. Does Innoslate have electronic signatures?
So the way we do that is through workflow. Let me actually show you, because I know that's confusing to people, and workflow is always one of those things you go, well, what is that? Okay, so workflow is set up in our schema editor. And here it is right here is workflow. And this is at the project level. And so for any item you want to have in here, issues, risks, test cases, anything that has kind of a status element to it, an enumerated attribute that you want to track, what you can then assign things, drafts to different people, different teams, and then get notified. You get email notification. It can be locked afterwards. So in those transitions, so you can see how you can easily set this up the way you want to for that approval cycle. And once the approval cycle is done, you can determine if that can be rejected or reworked. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of features here that set this up how you want to manage your activities. Now, as I understand the definition of electronic signature, since every object in the database has a history to it, so let me just go get one. Let's go get one of these documents here. And so as I look at that, and I want to find out its history, I just go to the history dialog. So this tracks who did what when. So if I see an approval that's happened and then it's locked, nobody else can change it because it's locked. Again, only an owner of the project can change it. And so you just limit who's the owners of the project. It's the approvers, so you can make it that way if you want. So again, there's a lot of simple ways to use it procedurally to do exactly what you want it to do. And the way the implementation of it, again, for requirements is here. I'm in draft, so I can only back to draft here. Okay. There we go. That's it. Okay. Well, this is a new feature in the tool, so I'm still learning how it works. But anyway, let me do this. Okay. So you go draft and select draft, and these are the states it can have. And so obviously, since I've been playing with this, I've 2 rejected and 2 in reviews for some reason. That would not normally be there. Then the in review, would go to other states. And again, it looks like somebody's been playing with this one, but you get the idea. It's very easy to set that up and force that workflow to be where you want it to be.
Great. Next question is, does Innoslate provide any reporting or analytics capabilities for Agile projects, such as burn down charts or velocity tracking?
Yeah, so we do have a risk burn down chart. And so we have that capability. So that would be a fairly easy one to morph into something more. Let's see, where do I have those right now? Show the risk burn downs. So here's a risk burn down chart. So that could be used for that kind of purpose. Or we can set up other things. You can also set up an XY plot and do some of those things as well if you want to do those. But you know, if there's something that, but here is more where I work on the dashboard where the recently modified requirements. I can track the status. So here, this is doing V&V status, but I also can have a requirement status element as well. So there's a lot of ways to track it in the tool and see that information.
Great. Import Analyzer currently does not support PDF files for artifacts. Is this a requirement in the future?
So I guess the thing is that I found with PDF, it's so simple to take, and if you get Adobe Acrobat and save the PDF as a Word file, then that brings it in using the word parser very quickly and easily. So we haven't had a lot of call for the PDF requirement, but I guess that's something we can certainly look at in the future if that's something people need, if they want a direct one. But you have a fairly easy workaround with Adobe Acrobat.
How can I find out more about the middle out?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is go to, let's see, I think I've got it here, innoslate.com. And if I go to resource page currently, and I scroll down, there are books, and they're free downloads. So if you want to download it for free, take a look, and you read all about it.
Can you create different requirement types like functional or non-functional?
Oh, yes. So the way we handle that is through labels. So if I go and look at a document here, and let me pick another requirements document I have. Let's try these. Yeah. And so again, I have my functional requirements have labels, so I just associate them with it, or performance requirement. Again, I can have both. I can and. Oh, by the way, I can switch this to an or, and that gives me both. So that's another kind of neat feature for the label when you're done. So that's the way we handle that. It's very easy. And of course, you can add these in labels in the schema extender as well. That again, that is a owner privilege, so it's something you need to be the owner of the project to do that. We also have that, by the way, you can add to the schema globally as the administrator of the organization. So that within all projects within an organization could have that, could have those labels.
Great. Well, looks like all the questions for now. We would like to thank you for joining us today.
Okay, I was going to show more stuff, but that's okay. Okay.
Oh, did you want to show more?
Well, I was thinking that I could show them a little bit of the new features of Innoslate and 4.7. I'm not sure. I guess we did a webinar on that, didn't we, just a month ago? So maybe
Yeah, sure. You could do an overview if you could.
If anybody has any piece there. Again, that the round trip thing I can't show at the moment. I'm still getting all the information on that, but then this is the new view. And I will say this, it's this reason we went for documents view to do this is for infinite scalability. So this is why there's been a big change here. Also, you can use this little arrow thing here to drag and drop. So you can actually move things to different places. So I could move this up if I wanted to go under there. So there's also a numbering scheme capability. So you can set up different numbering options. And so again, I haven't played with that yet directly myself, but there is something you can do there using the meta number, a value for the number, instead of the actual number of the object. And so that way you can have a document like view where you have the those numbers being exactly the numbers you want, versus if you reuse one of those objects, you wouldn't see it otherwise. So, and notice, by the way, this got moved here. So that's where that is. Of course, I probably wanted to leave that. There it is. Okay. That was one of the things I wanted to show real quickly for, again, the Agile stuff. Again, if you're not familiar with the whole requirements quality score, if I select one of these things, let me select one of these guys. That's right here. Oh, wow, I went to the date, hit the wrong thing. Back. There we go. I actually hit the picture, so it, of course, launches you to the picture. Anyway, the attributes here are here for that. And again, if you see something you think is missing, you can add that to this quality score. So you can make that be part of that quality roll up. That's easy to show you how to do that if you want. It would be then manual, but again, I think you want to be careful of full automation, because things like correct means, is it legal? You know, feasible, is it possible? These are things that require some human judgment. So anything you see with this kind of natural language processing, be a little wary of that as being a potential issue for it. So what else do I want to say? So also, if you are doing SysML, there is, we did update the SysML diagram significantly. So you be a little bit more close to what I think people expect to see from a SysML diagram. So those have been updated with some of the new features with guards and swim lanes and some of these other things that were not there before. So, and of course the background that they put on it. So again, that's very old style approach to having this. It reminds me of when I was learning drafting in high school. So I see another question. It says,
how do you connect an action diagram to a requirement?
Sure. So that's very easy. So if I have a requirement here, I'm sorry, action, I would just use the relationships that are available to me to do that. And so I have specified by, satisfies, trace to, and verified, trace from in this case, and then verifies a requirement. So again, you can use these to link back to it. And then if you go back to your diagram, your document view, let me go back to the document. That's where the ST and V are. So if I look at the relationships in this case, that's already happened. So satisfied by is, it's been linked to the telescope. The trace to has a number of different requirements that it's also associated to. So this is requirements tracing to requirements, and then verification test cases. So I also noticed the commenting is built in, and that's something a reviewer can provide. And now a reviewer can also, this is a new feature in 4.7, a reviewer can propose a change. They can actually go in and make a change, but it becomes proposed, and then the owner has to accept it before it's actually implemented. So that's another new feature in Innoslate 4.7. Test Center was also updated, by the way. So again, this is something I haven't had a chance to do a lot with myself. I've been traveling a lot this year. So But then again, you're going to see a very similar kind of infinite scrolling capability, the the hierarchy here, things like that. Test cycles are now over here, so you can set up your test cycles and see what the test cycles are, create new ones. Probably the most interesting thing about this, once you click into one of these, you now have to deselect it, so it doesn't auto save it. And I know a lot of people worry about losing information. So if you make a change, you can save it right away, but it will have to exit to come back. So, but what we found is if you do get a timeout, at least on the cloud, that it is set up so you can automatically go back to where you were. So that's no longer a problem either.
See, we got another comment or a question. To do traceability, do you need to set up trace to relations?
So that's all automatically in the schema. We use lifecycle modeling language as our base schema, and we've extended that a bit. Although I think the language is catching up with a lot of those extensions, so you can see it. And so yeah, so it's already there for you. And then all you have to do is set up your, if you want to get the traceability matrix, you just select the traceability matrix to open that. Make a query vr.star, and I want to verify. Is it verify? Is it verify? Yeah, verifies. There we go. And so this gives me, it shows me that matrix. Again, here's where that quality checker can come into place, the traceability assist and the suspect assist, I'm sorry, the assistants. And so you can see those here live, and you can see how it's very appropriate, how it's linked together. So again, you notice this is now the other way. I've got the test cases coming down in the rows, and I've got my verification requirements coming. So I can see it either way and work from either direction on it. If you put an X in the box, that creates the relationship for you. So that's one of the quickest ways to do set up your traceabilities between things. Hope that answered the question.
That looks like all the questions. Are there any last tidbits you'd like to share before we close out?
No, I think you're going to find, again, we're using it for Agile and have been since day one. So we're actually very excited about interest in Agile and Agile requirements. So if there's something you think we're missing, I heard one thing that was suggested was that we should take note of was more burn down and velocity tracking. So that's another, there's a couple widgets we could easily add to the dashboard for that purpose. So yeah, but so again, any suggestions like that are always welcome. Again, you can go directly, you can email us directly, or just send feedback to the form here. And we really do work hard to give the users everything they need and everything they want. Even we actually try to go we're sort of beyond need almost at this point. You can do almost anything you need to do with this. I haven't used any of the tools for 10 years, and we work a variety of very complicated systems engineering projects, and I haven't had a problem doing them. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dan, and thanks everyone for tuning in. As a reminder, we'll be following up with you very soon to send you a link to the recording and the presentation slide deck. We hope you can join us for our next webinar, Go Beyond Microsoft Office with Innoslate, on March 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you can't join us live, be sure to register and receive the slides and recording. We also encourage you to visit our website and our blog, as well as connect with us on social media. That concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you next month.